welcome to Countdown 2019 on 99.3 Nigeria Info FM. It's 10 minutes past 4. I'm Awogo Obo, and we are streaming this live on Facebook as well as on Twitter. We'll begin with the ideas segment. We're going to be asking the question, does the process by which the leadership of the National Assembly emerge affect its oversight and accountability duties? The question I will be asking on Countdown, on the idea segment. And you can follow the program on Twitter, the different handles at Countdown 2019 NG, at Rotimi Sanko, at Obo, at SS Ekwesili, at Nigeria Info FM, at Ideas Radio NG. And then you can also tweet if you've got questions. The WhatsApp number also important for you if you cannot get through when we throw open the lines. It's 0809 597 5805. So, Ayo, good evening.
Hello. Well, I think this is the final stretch as regards the 2019 elections.
For the governorships.
For the governorships.
Yes.
But we're still, well, they're part of the elections. And everything is moving to the court. That's not why I'm dressed like this, but everything is moving to...
You look like you are prepared for a legal battle.
By the way, if you get on Facebook and Twitter.
On Facebook and Twitter.
You can see...
If you haven't seen Iron legal
costume.
Yes.
Well, part of the costume anyway.
Part of it,
not the paraphernalia of the horsehair wig and
yes,
gown
but
and
your
stuff
hair looks sufficiently black and white.
Well, it's always been like that.
Grey and white.
But it's always been like that. So, but what we're looking at in this section is because with the National Assembly membership taking shape, of course subject to litigation, election petitions and so on. With that taking shape, the ruling party is once again trying to decide in advance what its dream ticket looks like. And I say once again, and I use the word ruling party without specifying APC or PDP, because ruling parties have continued to have this idea that they can dictate what's going to happen in the National Assembly, and time and again they've come a cropper.
Well, in the past, just going down memory lane, when the PDP was the ruling party
Yes.
at the national level, it has tried, the executive
Yes.
has tried to
Well, I think
influence
when you say the executive, I think that we should actually put it where it's supposed to be, first of all, which is with the party.
Well, okay, so the ruling party has tried to select, and often the executive has had a view as
yes.
to who it would prefer. But more often than not, the members of the House are the ones that have selected or elected their own leadership.
Yes.
And this has happened even when PDP...
Particularly when PDP,
Yes.
in fact, because APC has only had one try
time,
and it failed spectacularly. It ended up not just with not its own choice, but with actually a PDP senator as the deputy Senate president. And I don't think one can really one can really look at anything that was more of a failure, at least when the PDP tried to impose and the members went against the wishes of the PDP. They at least did choose members from within their own party that they preferred, rather than members that they didn't prefer.
So specifically, what leadership are we looking at?
We're looking
within
particularly at the leadership of the National Assembly, the Senate, the Senate President, Deputy Senate President, and then the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Deputy Speaker. Now, certainly we can remember the emergence of Bankole, Oladimeji Bankole, as the Speaker. That was not the choice of the PDP, which wanted to have somebody from the Southwest, but they also wanted to burnish their gender-sensitive credentials by having a female speaker, particularly after the era in which the first female speaker of the House had crashed and burned for offences that were... that was Patricia Ete.
No, I'm the one afterwards.
The one that they now wanted to...
was Akonde from Oyo State.
Yes, and but the members chose somebody else. But as I said, the PDP wanted to show that it was an inclusive party by proposing a female senator, female member from the House from Oyo State. Then again, the emergence of then Speaker Tambuwal, same difference. And at the Senate level, we saw that the Obasanjo administration was quite forceful in making sure that its choice would emerge as the speaker, but those speakers seemed to inevitably crash and burn, and then the Senate would choose its would make its own choice.
Its own preferred
choice.
choice.
Its own choice. So now we have a situation, and without going into too much into the politics of it, the question is that does the failure of the executive to get its own choice as the or the person that it would prefer, or that the party would prefer as the Speaker or the President of the House or the President of the Senate, does that increase or decrease the accountability performance of the National Assembly? Do they exercise more oversight when they are independent, or do they not?
Well, I know that this is one of the issues that people differ on, because some people think that the ruling party has a right to have a member of their party as the leader of the legislature. So that's one issue. Some people treat it as a right. The ruling party must produce. That's one. Two, some people think that it shouldn't just be a member of their party, but a person of their choice.
Yes.
So those are two issues that...
Well, I mean, I think that because we are coming from a parliamentary system, which is the Westminster model, where you have less insistence that in the first place, the principal officers, such as the Speaker in a parliamentary system, don't necessarily change. In fact, the convention is that the Speaker is not opposed in his constituency when he's running for re-election. So he becomes a wherever he emerged from or she emerged from.
Nobody contests against the Speaker.
So hence,
hence the UK Speaker, for instance.
Yes. The Speaker of the House.
Yes.
But if you look at some the kind of presidential system that we have, which for which I suppose that the nearest example is the Congress of the United States, the ruling party does the leadership does go with the ruling party. So and there it's not it's more a matter of the ranking member. Here we have to balance both the ranking and the zonal geopolitical balancing. But the point is, Rotimi, is that does this have an impact on the way that the National Assembly holds the executive to account, or is what we've seen more of power struggle between the executive and the National Assembly, with the question of actual accountability coming a very distant fourth or fifth in the considerations of our distinguished and honourables?
Well, again, partly because we've come from a long era of military rule, I think there are a lot of people, especially if they are supporters of whatever happens to be the ruling party at the time, they think that in fact the National Assembly has to play second fiddle to the executive. And those people think that when the National Assembly tries to hold the executive to account, or tries to play its oversight role, its constitutional
Well, that's what
oversight
I'm
role.
asking. Do they ever actually do that?
Well, so my answer is, some people think that when the National Assembly tries to play its oversight role, that it is obstructing. So you see the statement this week.
That's what I'm saying again. I appreciate that, but that's what I'm saying again. There's actually playing an oversight role.
Yes.
And then there's
power struggle.
obstructing. And what I'm asking is that have we actually seen the National Assembly really calling people to account?
Well, in the case of, say, the budget, say the 2018 budget, so we had a statement this week from the president in which he said that he wishes that the budget process had moved much faster.
Yes.
Last year. Of course, we all agree that we hope the budget process moved much faster.
Well, it would help if they got the budget before the National Assembly on time.
Yes,
but,
so that's one. But he then insinuated that it didn't move quick enough because the National Assembly was obstructing.
Yes. And what was the National Assembly's explanation? Was it actually...
So the National Assembly then claims that they had to interrogate the budget as submitted, and they then said, in fact, that the budget was not even submitted on time, and that which is true, and that which not submitted on time, but the National Assembly also says that the budget did not include a lot of line items which they thought they should be there. They had to clarify, and that those clarifications took a lot of time. So that's their argument for the oversight function. Now, obviously, because of the way the ruling party felt that the leadership emerged, there was power struggle, because some people just dedicated all their time to trying to wrest the power back to whoever they thought it belonged to.
Yes, but also those who were in power, apart from saying that they had to interrogate line items, were they in fact holding anybody to account? I mean, it's one thing to go through the budget.
By my standards, no. Eventually, no. Yeah, I mean, by my standards, eventually, no. Because if I was Senate President or Speaker of the House of Reps,
the things that you would pick on or would oversee are not the ones that
they were choosing, because I would be focusing on, for instance, human development issues that we need to drive the country forward: education, health, housing, rail, and so forth. In fact, I would take a view that the House needs to support those issues more, even more than the executive has put forward, and that would be a basis for cooperation. Now, in terms of specifics, it turned out that in the last leadership, not only were they not taking a leadership role to say, in terms of issues, yes, in terms of saying the government is not doing enough here and there, we propose more houses, more schools, more teachers, and so forth. So we can say that they didn't play that role, but that is the kind of role that they should be playing. And if the executive is able to impose or make it a tradition, regardless of party, if they make it a tradition that they have a right to impose, then that oversight function does not work anymore.
I think that we're really in the weeds of Nigerian politics simply because we just haven't seen. It's not really a matter of leadership. It's really the fact that we haven't seen our elected representatives
play the role they are supposed to be,
and properly educate themselves about the kind of role that they ought to be playing in this regard. Because, quite frankly, whichever party you belong to, if you have cogent points to make rather than quote and unquote obstructionist points, if you have what we like to call constructive criticisms, then they can be they can help to drive the development agenda forward. But what we're seeing at the moment is that if a leadership emerges, which, let's say, if the government, the executive and the party get their own way, a leadership emerges which is what they want, then the tendency is that the people who will be called, not that troublemaker who is always asking awkward questions in connection with the oversight role and the accountability role, but this person who only stands
for
up
more human development,
but only this person who only stands up to say, can we congratulate the and so on and so forth on the wonderful job that they're doing. So it's really something that we need to have to pay attention to. I should also draw your attention perhaps to the, although it's a story that's been denied, that the choice of the ruling party for the Senate president was alleged to have said that the constitution should be amended to allow our elderly president to run for even more terms than he's constitutionally entitled to at the moment. And I just thought that we should also flag up that if those are his views, and he has certainly denied them, but even if those are ideas that he's harboring in the bosom of his innermost heart, the reality of Nigeria's constitution is that a constitutional amendment also has to be approved by 2/3 of the state houses of assembly, by a majority vote in each of in 2/3 of these state houses of assembly. And as it happens, if such a proposal follows party preferences, one would find that no party has a 2/3 majority at the state level, at the state house of assembly level.
Which is another important reason why we need to pay attention to what happens in the National Assembly. Because once the Rivers elections are over, hopefully on the 13th of April, the attention switches to the National Assembly. And as Adams Oshiomhole said when he met with the APC members of the National Assembly, he said, and I quote, "We have the numbers to change the constitution even if we want."
You don't.
And I thought, actually, Mr. Chairman of APC, you don't.
Absolutely not.
You have the numbers in one chamber, in one house of the National Assembly,
which is the
House of Reps.
Yes,
but
they don't have 2/3 of the Senate.
Yes, but more importantly, if you look at the requirement which you just mentioned, that they also need 2/3 of the states, then they don't have that. So the public education is really important, because anybody that would have been watching that meeting would have been wondering, what's Oshiomhole saying? They have the power to change the constitution, and what do they want to change in the constitution?
You see, I mean, some people would say, if what you want to change is the immunity clause, for
instance,
that could be something that
to improve accountability,
the Nigerian public would support. But if what you're saying is that we want to just abolish term limits, then I don't think that that's going to fly very well with the Nigerian people. And certainly, if it were to become the policy of the ruling party, they would find that the support that they were able to get by virtue of being a less ugly bride than the alternative might turn the other bride into a beauty after all. So I think that these kind of statements are it's kind of a loose talk. I mean, it may be good enough,
but it raises flags as to why everyone has to pay attention to what is happening in the National Assembly, the Senate, the House of Reps, and the state houses of assembly. Because if people don't pay attention to it, or don't understand what the balance or the requirements should be for constitutional amendments and so forth, then one party can blag the country into trouble. And certainly, if they do have those numbers, could get the country into trouble if citizens are not paying attention.
And I think also that our citizens tend to not interrogate what our elected legislators do. We don't look at their voting record. We don't ask them, apart from the third term saga of 2006, there's really very little, and that's why the legislators have found it so difficult to be asked by organizations like Tracker what happened to the constituency project for which money was released, which you nominated. They really don't like being asked to account for anything.
Yeah. The point which you are making, which Nigerians need to pay attention to more, is that in most developed countries, where there is more transparency and accountability, constituents can interrogate the voting records of their representatives, and accountability organizations can also do so in order to point out that this member of parliament,
when it came
you didn't
to
vote for
women's,
education,
rights,
you didn't vote for health, you didn't vote for women's rights, you supported more nuclear weapons,
you didn't vote for child rights.
Yeah. So next time when the person turns up and says, "I want you," say, no. When the bill for more funding for education came up, you raised your hand against it and said that any education that is free is not useful. So who are you representing really? So I think these issues and more are issues that we'll be looking at in the run-up to the National Assembly
inauguration.
Yes, and the election of their leadership.
Well, I think we can assume that the APC is not going to be at a presidential meeting when they should be electing their principal officers.
If they do it again, too bad for them.
Well, as they say. But I think also that we as that we are going to see. I'm sorry. I think I should actually stop the ideas segment because it's such an interesting topic.
Yes.
It gets very little airing.
But we'll have a lot of time between now and early June, when the National Assembly has to elect its leadership. Because once Rivers is done and out of the way, the attention switches to the National Assembly and the state houses of assembly, and we can then interrogate this in more detail.
And it's going to be a very interesting situation in some state houses of assembly.
Yes.
So,
like in Sokoto, for example.
Sokoto, yes. The APC has, I think the APC has 16 seats and the PDP has 14, but the governor comes from the PDP. So with that, I want to urge listeners to please follow us on Twitter at Ideas Radio NG. Check out our website, ideasradio.ng. And you can also see some of our videos on the YouTube channel if you weren't watching us live today. So over to you, Rotimi and Ahoho.
Okay. Well, we hope
and Georges.
And Georges, yes. We hope you will stay for some of the conversation.